And you get your pick of seats.
Oh,
Oh.
thank you.
Well, then you get less of your pick of seats.
Thank you.
You need
Thank you. I'm wondering. How are you?
Doing okay now. How you doing?
Good. They moved on us, huh?
Yeah, they did. For many good reasons.
Oh, good. Hope everybody finds it okay.
Right? Well, hopefully somebody puts a sign on the.
They are. They're putting signs up now. It's just that everybody comes running in late,
Right, sure.
and so they come, they run through the door and not look. At least that's what I do.
Right.
Do you think I brought 3 bottles just to make sure we were
You're perfect.
good and
I
good and
really-
hydrated?
I really appreciate that. That's something that sometimes we neglect.
Oh, it's easy to. A number of times I've given a panel and thought to myself, I really wish I would have grabbed the water before I came up here. Amazing.
Thank you. I'm Sherry Double, by the way, with the commission. What's your name?
Oh, hi. I'm Nick Stiegelmeyer. I'm the assistant director of admissions and first initiatives.
Oh, hey, Nick. Good to meet you.
Well, the mic's picking up just fine, isn't it?
Oh,
I
good.
walked by and heard myself out there.
I'm with the IT department at the law school.
Check, check. All right.
See you again. Nice to see you again. Look at your schedule. Brutal. It is. Oh my gosh, you're gonna have a lot of. But I'm hoping that this weather will keep you. We're the ones that have to.
Check. All right.
So, did you have a good trip? Good. Did you get to meet colleagues?
Ceremonies. Okay. We've got those for audience questions. And Mike would prefer that people.
No, there's still some areas.
Internet land, no one's gonna hear it.
That's good, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're hosting a session later.
Yes, so, the commission on steps, commission on diversity, equality, and faculty steps, and we'll have an hour.
Okay.
Not the promise.
Okay. So, okay.
I think that's
On their mind. It's always there. I enjoy talking to my colleagues. That colleague on. None of it, but it's great.
People watch. I gotta get back to that point.
I don't want to talk.
I don't want to talk anymore.
Well, I told you, right? I mean, she prevented me from going somewhere. I mean, I was offered a presidency of a major research university last year.
Renewable Energy Research. I'm in the
Wonderful
business
to meet
manager.
you.
Nice to meet you.
I've met you already.
You'll probably be seeing a lot of Kevin. I think you're on the schedule a couple of times, aren't you?
Yes,
Couple times.
he drove me this morning, so.
Oh, there you go. Okay, thank you. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Some of you are here virtually and some of you are here face-to-face. We really appreciate your time. I'm Sherry Duffy with the Commission on the Status of Women here at the University of Louisville and a part of the search committee for our next Executive Vice President for Research and Innovation. We're very fortunate to have Dr. K.T. Valsaraj join us this morning. I'm glad you took the time to come on to see his presentation today, Research and Economic Development. As you can see on the screens here are all of his titles. I'm not going to repeat those. I think we can see those for themselves. I would like to talk about Dr. Valsaraj's former VP in Research of Economic Development for Louisiana State University. Go Tigers. I said that out loud. He's a former department chair, and he's a professor in the Department of Chemistry Engineering. Is that correct?
Chemical engineering.
Chemical engineering, sorry. You can tell I'm from soft science. So thank you for joining us, and without further ado, Dr. Valsaraj, I'll turn this over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sherry. And let me first thank the committee for inviting me for this discussion. And of course, all of you who are here, thank you very much for coming. I know the weather is brutal outside, but I know to see you all, it is wonderful. Let me first of all start off by saying that I don't intend to talk a lot because I want you all to be able to ask me questions as to why I'm here and what I'm going to do for you. So I will go through certain slides fairly quickly, but my objective is really to give you a brief description of what I see as the research arena, in the research arena, what I can bring and what I see the opportunities are here at UFL. So I've structured my talk in this direction that I will give you a very small, short self-introduction because I know that many of you have already seen my resume and read my letters, but in spite of that, I'm sure that there are some of you who probably don't know a lot about me and my capabilities and my experience, so I'll talk a little bit about that. Then I wanted to go, I've sat on a number of committees with respect to research on a national level, so I have a fairly good idea about the assessment of both global and national R&D scene. And I want you to be aware of where we are and why we want to do what we want to do next in relation to that. As I see it, because as I said, the status of UFL research, I'm seeing it from an outsider looking in. And I don't have all of the information, but I do have some of the information to put it in context. So I'll tell you a little bit about what I see as the status of your research. And a number of ideas and suggestions for moving UFL into the top echelons of the research institutions in the country and what we can do in respect of that. I'll tell you in one slide what my administrative philosophy is, and I always tell people if I'm an administrator, if I cannot tell you what I want, what kind of an administrator I am in one slide, then I shouldn't be the one. So that's the way I structured my talk. So let me introduce you. I am very much a product of a multidisciplinary philosophy. I was a biology major to start with, and I was destined to be in a medical school. But then I switched, and I became a chemist, got my BS, then my MS, and then my PhD from Vanderbilt University, not too far from here. At Vanderbilt, I made the switch essentially from chemistry to chemical engineering pretty much, completely. I never served in a chemistry department, but I've been in a chemical engineering department ever since. I started my career at LSU as a professor, and then was the graduate advisor and held several professorships at LSU. My administrative experience has mainly been, first, I was the chair of the Department of Chemical Engineering between 2005 and 11. during which time the department underwent a significant change in terms of the number of faculty, the number of students, the diversity, as well as getting a new building on board. So all of those things were put in place before I became an associate vice chancellor for 2 years. At the time, we had several searches for the vice president for research and 3 searches, national searches, which failed. And at the time, I was already an associate vice chancellor, and people convinced me, why can't you be a candidate for this position? That's when I put my hat in the ring. At a national search, we had 5 candidates, and I became the vice president in 2013. At that time, we also had a new provost. The provost was Stuart Bell, who then became the president of University of Alabama. After he left, we had another provost, who was Rick Kubek. 3 years later, he left for the presidency at Michigan Tech. And that's when I decided, well, I needed to have some time for myself and to re-energize my research program. And if you have looked at my resume, I've been a researcher ever since. I've never given up on my research. And I hope to do that, continue that if I can here, if I'm given the opportunity. There have been a number of other services that I've gone through at LSU. I was a faculty senator. I was on the college policy committee, the promotion and tenure committee, and all of the other things, not only at the college level, but then as a VPR, I was also that at the university level. I've had an extensive research portfolio, and I still publish. Even today, even this year, I had 3 publications, which is not unheard of for somebody like me. And yes, I've had a number of accolades from AAAS, ICHE, National Academy of Inventors, and the Royal Society of Chemistry. I've been fellows of all of those institutions. I've taken on a lot of interdisciplinary research over my lifetime, and over $21 million in research support over the years, several from many different agencies. Also had, over the years, as a VPR, I served on a number of national boards and committees. So as you see, I have had the experience, but then I decided last year, actually in 2018, I decided that I needed an administrative sabbatical. I went to the provost. There was an interim provost, and told her that I'm going to do this, but she convinced me, don't do this now. I'm an interim. I can't have another search on my plate. So I decided to continue for 6 more months. And then when she became permanent, I approached her again and I said, this is the time for me to step away. I need an 8-month administrative sabbatical. So I did not have any administrative duties, no teaching, just come back to the lab. And during the time, I would help the office if need be, but you need to have your own team. And that's how they have a new team now in place. And this was a very healthy and active way in which I stepped out, a courteous way to step out of that position. And for 6 months, I haven't been looking for any positions. But then in July, one of my very good friends, the executive VPR at Arizona State University, Punch, and Kelvin Drogmeyer, who is now the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Director, both of whom very good friends of mine. I've served on several boards and meetings with them. They said, well, you need to look at this. University of Louisville is back in many ways, and you need to look at what's going on there. They have a new president, they have a new dynamism. Why don't you look and see what you can do there? That's why I applied for the position. I see a lot of positives here. I see a lot of things that are on the upward swing, and I would like to see how I can contribute to that. You have a dynamic president now, and you have a wonderful strategic plan. Those are the elements that I think somebody needs if we want to be successful in this position. So that's the reason why I'm here, and I see a lot of positives in University of Louisville. So a few of the major accomplishments. This is a busy slide, and you don't need to read through it carefully, but as a VPR at any institution, there are about 6 or 7 things that you have to do in order to succeed. The first one is, of course, strategically thinking about things. So for me, when I came into the position, it was the first time that there was ever a discussion of a strategic planning exercise, not only for the office. What I contributed to the office became the strategic plan for the university eventually. If you look at the LSU strategic plan now, there are elements there of research which are essentially just taken straight out of the strategic plan that we had. And that was done through a number of town hall meetings that we convened, and we had an outside group that came in and helped define that strategic plan. And that's how that whole thing came into place. We worked with a lot on robust modeling, budgeting model for the office. The office didn't have a robust budget at the time. I worked with the new CFO to come up with an actual budget, and that has helped now in moving the office forward. Started a lot of new things that were never there. For example, there was nothing at the office at the time to really help faculty write proposals and do essentially large multidisciplinary proposals. One of the things that I started was an Office of Research Advancement. The only thing that they did was they would collect all of the information that you need except the science. So if you wanted to build a large research group, going after large research grants, the first thing is to identify the people that need to be there, connect them with people outside of the university and even internationally, and then work on all of the things that you need. And that was what the Research Advancement did. By the time that I left, they were responsible for almost 1/3 of the proposals that went out of LSU. They had a very good success rate at the same time. That was also a mechanism to bring several units together. As you know, LSU has medical school, but the medical school is in different parts of the city or the state. One is in New Orleans, one is in Shreveport, and we are in Baton Rouge. So there was very little interaction between them. I convened a lot of things in between them, the deans, to put in together certain collaborative proposal models. And the idea came out of that office, essentially, to handle all of those things in one place. And that has resulted in a number of major grants that have received IDEA grants and COBRE and Embrace that they have received of late. During my time was when LSU had the highest research expenditures ever. And that was because we had continued to do certain things. We had 2 years of difficulties in hiring because we had a hiring freeze. And so many of the faculty that left LSU, we couldn't hire them back. And so we saw a decrease in the productivity as a result of that. But now it is coming back up because we have been able to slowly hire back. We have we had a new governor who was very much influential in bolstering higher education again, and that has helped tremendously in pushing us forward. The largest number of research proposals submitted were also during my time. That was because of the Research Advancement doing all of those things in order to prepare faculty to do these things. The compliance was all over the place, so I brought them all together as an Office of Research Compliance. And they were really there not to make people do things, but to help. So that research compliance reported to me. We also started an Office of Postdoctoral Affairs to work with postdocs all over the university. We had about 150 of them, but they had no identity. Research engagement was another important one for international cooperation, and that has resulted in a number of international cooperative agreements since then. Federal-state relations was one of the important things that I took over during that time, and I became the spokesperson essentially for most of the research active things. Essentially, we mentioned the COGR. We became regular members of COGR at the time. I also established during the time a 501c3 under the foundation to go after cyber defense and security efforts, because this has to be done not in a normal way as just normal research proposals, but has to be at GSA rates, and these research efforts are not done on a regular 1 year, 2 year cycles, but it comes and goes. That establishment, which is called the Stevenson Technologies Corporation now, under the foundation, has added about $58 million in 3 years, and is growing. And I know that you have a research foundation here, and hopefully that's another mechanism to increase the research foundation. I completely revamped the Innovation Commercialization Office when I came in. It was floundering. And within 2 years, we had the highest patenting licensing portfolio at LSU. We also worked very hard with the Board of Regents to release what we call LSU, the LIFT program, which is a program that we built in so that ideas can go to testing stages, and we had certain money to do that, anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000. It was parsed out through a competitive process, and many of those things were tied in with our I-Core program so that they also had the ability to understand commercialization efforts. So tying those things in together, we were able to increase our disclosures considerably, and our portfolio for licensing also became a major effort. So twice in the last year, we were listed in the top 100 universities with utility patents. That was an effort that I think not only worked for LSU in terms of improving the commercialization, but also in terms of what the outside agencies saw. That is, the industries and the businesses there actually saw that LSU was now in the game, playing the game that they wanted us to do. Of course, we have economic development as a part of my title, and I took that very seriously. And I hired somebody from the Louisiana Economic Development to do that. And he is the spokesperson for all industry-related efforts. As a result of that, there were a couple of things that came to Louisiana. The two things: IBM had their 800-man workforce move into Baton Rouge. And they worked very hard with the university itself to not only provide the workforce they need, but also on the research aspect. So a large supercomputer, an IBM supercomputer called Delta, came into LSU because of that effort. There was also another effort with the former HP, which split off into DXC Technologies. They moved into New Orleans with the 1,200 workforce. We did a very similar thing with them too. The reason we were able to do that was we brought the Louisiana Economic Development into the picture, and we would actually sit at the table with them. And today, if I go there, I know I have I will get a hearing. Previously, it was not so. I made the change essentially to make sure that that part of economic development activities that the university is doing, it's not that the university can do economic development, but the university can assist in that. And that's what we did. Diversity was a very important aspect for me, even when I was a department chair. When I came into the department as a chair, it was an all-male department, whereas the student was 35% female. There was nobody there. By the time I left as the department chair, we had 3 faculty members who were hired into the department, female faculty members, one of which was an African-American student. And 2 of them received national awards, career awards. One of them left because her husband was working for Dow. She was an executive, and he moved to Midland, so she moved to Michigan at the time. But of the 2 faculty members, I mentored them both. One followed me as the department chair, and now is the dean of the College of Engineering, the first female dean of the College of Engineering. Even today, I think that mentoring system that we have in order to increase not only the diversity, but also the fact that there is someone who actually believes in it is important. When I came into the office, I worked very extensively with our Vice Provost, Derek Rovaris, who heads the Office of Diversity. Our office at the time had the ability to provide the startup funds for every faculty hires. So we had some say in what kind of faculty you would hire. So Derek and I would go to every dean and say, well, you are hiring. If you hire, look at these aspects as well. And we were very much influential in hiring more faculty members, especially both gender-wise and racial-wise, into the College of Engineering and the College of Science. The other colleges also worked very heavily. I mean, veterinary science is another important aspect where they hired a lot of diversity hires over the years. These were things that I've done over the years, and I still have a lot of commitments towards those things. So that gives you some idea about what I've done, and these are some of the things that normally every VPR should be involved in. Now, as I see it, there are a couple of things that really you need to do in order to be successful in that role, not just the accomplishments that I just mentioned. One is, I'm talking about the current state of a VPR in any major research university. Everything is now interdisciplinary. There is no there are people who actually can run their own labs, do all of the things, but they have got to be integrated in an interdisciplinary manner in many ways. So how do you engage and promote interdisciplinary research? Of course, you have to work with the provost, the president, the deans in implementing every strategic element plan that you have. And those that relate to research, you need to take ownership and continue. One thing that I've seen over in the national scene, very much so these days, is the fact that research integrity and policies, including regulatory relief in a way, is very, very important to consider and process. And the VPR should be the one who should be at the forefront to bat for the faculty. Catalyze new research infrastructure. Of course, that goes without saying. I mean, if you don't have adequate infrastructure, you don't have a research component for any university. Federal, state, and private stakeholders and how to bring them together. This is something that has become a part of VPR's roles in every university. Whether it is done seriously or not, it still has to be done, because otherwise you will not be able to move things around. As an example, at LSU, when we had a governor that was severely cutting higher education over 8 years, we went from 65% to 20% state support. Everything was turned on its head. We had to find a way to still engage with the state stakeholders. I was one of those people who actually went there so many times during the legislative sessions, sat with those people and made sure that they understand what they're going to lose if we lose some of this faculty. Hopefully that helped. And the president does all of the heavy lifting, but we were there to support him in that. Of course, robust tech transfer commercialization activity everywhere. It has got to be done if it is a research university, and assistant economic development. And of course, LSU has a research park, an innovation park as it is called. Due to the efforts that I emphasized there, it became the AURP's Research Park of the Year in 2016. Charlie D'Agostino ran a wonderful operation, and he's now followed by someone else who is doing an equally good job right now. So that's another part of LSU's portfolio that I have worked, and I know that you have research parks here which are doing well, so I would be very willing to help assist in preparing those. So let me talk a little bit, what happened to that thing? Oh, okay, it's there. I follow this very carefully, and if you haven't followed it, you need to follow this global funding forecast that R&D magazine puts out every year. What is interesting is to look at the location of all of these bubbles. Those are all in terms of the population per million and the R&D as a percent of GDP. 20 years ago, this bubble was somewhere here. And this bubble was much larger, but was still in the same place almost. In this year, when the funding forecast came out, you could see where China is and where US is. The prediction is in 2 years they will actually come closer, even closer, and China will surpass US in terms of global R&D investments. It is clear why that is so, because of the fact that if you look at this, the research investment as percentage of GDP from the federal government has crossed over, and most of what we see in R&D is now business R&D. 60% of the R&D funds today is from the businesses, on the business side. But they're all product line, product-based research, not much that the university plays. In fact, less than 8%, I mean, the maximum that you can see in any university of all the universities, probably Johns Hopkins and MIT have got more than many others. Even for them, it's only 8 to 15% of their research portfolio comes from business. Most of the other universities are in the lower, less than 5%. LSU was about 1.5% or something when I took over. Now it is about 3%. That's a significant change, but I do not know exactly what the percentage is here, but you have to play in that role. You have to be able to engage the industries enough to make a change in your research portfolio. Otherwise, if you are just basing yourself on all of the funds from the federal government, it is not going to be sustained. So that's also shown here. I mean, the prediction is that, yes, the global R&D is going to show an increase. The US R&D is going to go 2.7%, but mainly industry. Look at the share. The US share is 25%, China's is 22% and growing. And even in the US, 72% is industry, only this much, most of it government. And then what we mean by 12% academia is what we are putting in universities itself in terms of unrecovered F&A and all of that. There's a significant portion that university actually subsidizes. And that's another part that the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Director Kelvin Drogmeyer has been harping on and seeing how that can be, there could be some relief in that direction. So the point I'm making is that there is a significant change and shift in the research environment, R&D funding environment over the years, and it's going to be in the same direction for years to come. And it's not only just that we remain competitive. US is still a more competitive research environment, but others are just catching up as well. So what's the innovation landscape for the US? Mostly having to do with shrinking R&D investment. This is, I've taken it mostly from the NRC report, which came out in 2012, but it's still valid. And there's another report that just came out that this is actually a very nice book if you have ever had a chance to read Research University in the Public Good. They run the IRIS program for, and it's from the University of Michigan. What is interesting is that 92% of R&D efforts are geared to one line of business, only 8% is diversified R&D. So can we actually play in that 8% and recover some of it to universities? It's a very good question. And it's not been answered since this report came up. There are some things that they talked about as recommendations, and I think they are still valid. For example, innovation clusters and hubs that you can create so that not just one university, but many universities play in the same cluster and try to recover things. Promoting public-private partnerships, which is unique in any way. Participation in global systems of innovation, and that's why I said and emphasize the fact that global systems have to be played into. And capture more value from public investment and research. What they mean is that we need to make ourselves more relevant to the state and the federal partners that fund the research. In other words, we need to be able to show them our relevance all the time, which was not the case in the 60s and 70s. That leads us to what we call a university as a source anchor hub. University is a source because the wonderful faculty that we have. They are the source. They're also an anchor because the university is not going to just pick up and leave and somewhere else. Every industry can do that, but not the universities. It's an anchor for a society. So the community that depends on it, we can be an anchor, and we should be. It's also a hub because things come and go. So this concept of a source anchor hub is something that is becoming more and more prevalent in the policy circles in DC. If you talk to Kelvin Drogmeyer, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Director, he will tell you that that's where they're moving most of their research policies towards, saying that you're an anchor, so you have a certain thing in your locality, but then you're a source because you have all of the resources you have, and then you should be a hub, which is what we can really do. So I took this from the 2021 R&D priorities document that just came out, and there were some very specific things that were mentioned in there as to what we could do, what they are going to planning to do in the next year, and even if the administration changes, many of these priorities will still remain the same. For example, in the security area, there's a lot of things that are going to be emphasized in the future. Similarly, for industries of the future, you've already heard about these things: artificial intelligence, quantum information science, communication networks, and advanced manufacturing. That's going to remain a theme for many years to come. Energy, oceans, and earth system predictability is an important aspect in terms of many of aspects, including climate change and all of the others. Then health and bioeconomic innovation, there is a lot of things that they are going to focus on in the next 2021 and beyond. And the same with space exploration. There are some cross-cutting agencies also that they are looking at, but you can see that they are all tied to the R&D budgetary priorities. And we need to be able to focus on these things in the future. So, and as far as I can see, there are several of these things that are already being focused on here, and you have critical faculty that are working on it. And we just need to support them and encourage them to move forward. So now let me come to the U of L research ideas. And what I see, this is somebody looking from the outside. It's not someone who knows all the things inside. So what am I seeing from the outside? I see you as an R1, comprehensive R1 university with top-class creative efforts in all those different fields. And of course, you're not a land-grant university, so you don't have agriculture as part of your portfolio. Economic development is a cornerstone of your university's relevance, and I think that has been made even more clear in the new strategic plan that I've seen. You have some promising faculty, and I've looked at the peer-reviewed publications and others that have come out of here, Elsevier and other intelligence sources that I've looked at. You have some really wonderful faculty, really great faculty, putting out some really promising publications and research, and that is very important, of course. The unique geography, arts, and culture of the Bluegrass State, there's no need to re-emphasize it, but that is already there, and you are an anchor in that respect. And of course, you have a competitor, but you are an anchor. And what I see when I look at all of those things is the tie-up of all of these things into a strategic plan finally that takes into account all of these various things and try to emphasize those things in your future endeavors. That's what I see as the university going forward. You have had your difficulties, but I think you have come out of it pretty well, and you're in a growth phase. I also looked at some of your research data, and of course you have had your ups and downs. Many universities have the same thing. Even LSU, if you look at it, you will see the same ups and downs. But you hit a high peak somewhere in the 2010, 11, 12, and I don't know exactly the reasons for the downturn since then. It may have to do with faculty having left and not replaced properly and all of the other things. But I'm not going to look at those things. But what I see is that you're back on a rising pattern. Now, is that enough? 2 to 5%, but that should be much more than that. So you could probably go further. So if we strategically focus on certain things, you could move. I mean, I think you're ranked number about 122 or so in the national universities, but you have the capacity to go into the top 80 with strategic investments in hiring as well as investments. So I also looked at some of the distribution of research expenditures. Of course, your School of Medicine does 70–80% of your research, and that is understandable. And I will tell you that it is not so at LSU. We don't do, the medical school is not the highest contributor. In fact, other parts of the university contribute higher than that. But you do still have a number of other colleges and schools that that also carries weight, and I think there is a lot of promise in all of those colleges and schools. So what do I see as the ways to push UFL into the higher echelons of R1 ranking? One is, of course, increase the capacity for collaborative research, and I mean both global, inter, and intra-institutional. I mean, we have to look at the global picture. I mean, granted that you're hearing all about China and all of the other issues with respect to global research, but from what I've shown you, without performing and participating in the global platform, we are not going to move things up, and that is a given. Inter-institutional, and that is whether within the state or outside of the state, there has to be a lot more interactions and cooperative research that you can do. I know that many of the grants that you have now, you do have those things already built in, and I think we need to do more of it. Changing the landscape extramural funding, I think we need to be very strategic and align with the future priorities that we have. For example, what I mentioned, the OSTP's documents where they say that these are the priorities. And I will tell you, I've been in this business for a long time. Those priorities don't change with the administration very much. A new administration will come in, but many of those top line items, because they are the ones that everybody else is focusing on, will remain. So we need to be strategically aligned. Of course, we need to work on federal relations in DC. Now, one of the things that I had a lot of discussions with at LSU was to have a specific person assigned in DC who would work on federal relations to give us advanced knowledge of what is going to come in the future. That is someone who can troll the hallways and find out more about it and give us the information. That requires a sustained effort of somebody being placed there. Now, we have a federal relations person there, but that person is not working on research-related things, works on other aspects. So that is something that I finally convinced our president to do that, and that's when I stepped off. I think they are in the process of hiring somebody now. But that has got to be done. So we need to have some federal presence in DC, and we have to have a consistent presence there to make that possible. Of course, invigorating public-private partnerships. I know that you're already doing a lot of that already, so we just need to emphasize that more. Increasing commercialization and tech transfer. As I said, at LSU, one of the things that we were able to do was to really have the seed funds that we put out. As of last year, I think they have spent about $6 million in that seed funding concept. Every 6 months, they are putting out those things. Competitively awarded, and that's the reason why we were able to increase our tech transfer commercialization activities quite a bit and engage the business incubator and the research part to bring some of those things into play. We need to be able to do that. We lack, in the place where we lack a lot of VCs and angel investors in Baton Rouge, but we do have them in New Orleans, and we played that role from there. And New Orleans has its own bioinnovation incubator, and we tag along with them in order to get some of those things. There were 2 funds that were established at LSU as angel VCs, Louisiana Fund 1 and Louisiana Fund 2. We have some investors who actually invest in technologies that are coming out of LSU. I realigned IP protocols to make sure that that is facilitated, and that was a significant effort through the Board of Regents. Then, of course, I think in the next 5 years, a goal setting has to be done to see where we can go in the top 100 of the R1 universities. I realistically think that you can move pretty quickly into that realm very quickly. Some ideas and suggestions, making research relevant to states and nations' need. Of course, building centers of excellence, which you need to do that. You need to be able to affiliate with the National Lab or FFRDC. And FFRDCs are not easy to come by. It's a very political animal, and it has to be done that way. But if there is, I do not know how it is here. You obviously have Oak Ridge in Tennessee is the nearest lab, but there are other possibilities. And you have a legislative body and senators and legislators who are very influential here, and maybe we can do something. Bring in top-notch faculty and build your reputation. That's a given. Make diversity a hiring priority in all ranks and also in the administration. Not just in the ranks of the faculty, but also in the administration. They should see, if you look at the demographics, the future demographics that we are going to draw from for students-wise, Nathan Groff's book tells you very clearly where we are going. So we have to be able to reflect that in our administration and ranks. The strategic plan has got to be implemented with respect to the hiring plan as well, and the hiring of faculty. First, you need to diversify the funding portfolios, and I've given you a number of things that I think are possible. Federal directed funding, that is what I call, it used to be called pork barrel funding earlier, but now it is called federal directed funding. That is, you write it up, you make it written into your legislature, into the bills, and you can do that. We have been able to do some of those things, and that's how that 501c3 has been able to raise $58 million in 3 years. Some grand global challenges. There are ideas, and parts of those ideas are already in the plan, but I think we can go through the process. And the idea that I have is to have town halls for faculty and research leaders to come through, then filter it into a larger plan. And then at the end of the year, my office has a retreat, a research retreat, where I invite all of the deans of research, as well as deans and research leaders, and we tell them exactly what we have done. They give us feedback, and I take it back and re-implement it the next year, and that's what we do. Invigorate the economic development culture. You already have some of those things, and you can do much more in that aspect as well. These are all things that I believe can be done in a major university over the years. A lot of things that are just ideas and suggestions. And I have many more of those ideas through my experience leading an R1 university. And last, I would say what my administrative style is. And you would see that it is a contrarian style almost. I always try to see that I always think of myself as working for those who work for me, and not as an administrator who tells them what to do and just leave it. I listen quite a bit, and I don't talk unless I have to. Never ignore a request from anybody who you serve. I make it a point to answer every emails that I get. Not one will be left unanswered by the end of the day. Only then I go home. Delegate, but trust, and do not procrastinate. And that's the only thing. I mean, I delegate things. I trust them to do it, but I would make sure that they do not procrastinate. Think gray and think free. That is, I don't think black and white. I think there is an intermediate way for everything, and you have to think gray. Know which hill you are willing to die on. That is, I do not take many of the things that I don't want to. I know that will not be worth it, so I'll give it up and choose the ones that I can find. Be gentle but firm and decisive. And then this is something that Stephen Sample, I don't know if you knew Stephen Sample, he was the president of USC for a very long time, and he was a distinguished person in many ways. To have taken USC from where it was to a major research university in just about 10 years. He says, many want to be leader, but few want to do leader. Everybody wants to be a leader, but nobody wants to do something to be a leader. And then the rest is fairly obvious. I'm a big proponent of faculty governance. I never do anything without going to the faculty senate. If I have to implement a new policy, I will try to get their input before it is implemented. And faculty governance, me being a faculty senator myself in the past, I know that it's important. And the last is refined through leadership workshops. I still do go for workshops that refine my leadership skills. That is all I have, and hopefully I've given you a grand picture, and I'll be willing to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Dr. Valsaraj. So we have about 70 people that are online listening, and this is for you that are online. I opened up the chat room, and you can't see me because I'm back here getting ready to give your questions to Dr. Valsaraj. So we're going to give you a minute, those of you that are online, if you'd like to ask some questions. Please type them in. I believe it's on the right-hand side of your computer, the chat box. And then for the folks in the room, do we have any questions?
Right here.
Thank you very much for coming, and thanks for a great talk. Kevin Walsh, I'm at the Associate Dean of Research at Engineering School. So our college struggles with a few things. I was going to list a couple of them and just was wondering about your experience with if you struggled. You don't have to hit all of them, of course. I think some of these are common throughout the University of Louisville as well. Some of our faculty complain about high teaching loads. We struggle with startup packages, which are primarily done at the college level. Cost share, again, is the majority of that is done at the college level, and so we struggle with that. We struggle with PhD support because we have very limited number of fellowships and TAs. We rely a lot on research. Until you grow that research, it's kind of a chicken and egg kind of thing right there. And then the last one related to facilities, we struggle with aging and kind of limited facilities, but if you get a chance to look around, we do have some really state-of-the-art core facilities that we have right here, but we struggle with how to support those, because again, those are pretty much the responsibility of the colleges for some of these multi-user facilities. I noticed in your one slide, you talked about core facilities at one of your initiatives, but you didn't get a chance to mention it. So thank you. And again, you don't have to answer all of those. I just thought I'd share some of those with you.
Thank you very much. I think you hit a few points that I have had experience doing those things. The first thing I'll talk about is the core facilities. Yes, when I came in, there were a couple of core facilities that were entirely handled by the respective colleges. Colleges were spending their own indirect cost return to push them up. One of which was on material science. So when I came in, I brought them all under my office, and I said, the facilities, core facilities, will be handled and refurbished and controlled by our office, with personnel from different colleges that want to put them. So the personnel costs came from the colleges, but the rest of the money all came from our office. So it became more centralized. It is now the shared instrumentation facility. If you go online, you will see that that is one of the ways that we have also used to help bring in faculty, because the deans were able to say, okay, you need an instrument, you do not need it for your lab, but you have it in the core facility, and the central office is taking care of it. So that was one way to do that. Then you also mentioned the fact that you're struggling with trying to get more fellowships for PhD students. This is not unique to you, it's everywhere. for a while, about 2 years when I was vice president, the graduate school was under my office. What I did at that time, and I think they continued it after that office went back to the provost office, they worked with the foundation, the LSU Foundation, to raise money for some of the scholarships and fellowships. And especially in the College of Engineering and the College of Science, there were alumni who were willing to put their name behind it. They have now got several of those kinds of fellowships in place to sustain those. It's not all of it, but some of it. Startup funds, we had most of the funds, startup funds literally came from our office. The college had its startup funds, but they came mainly from our office. What I did was I worked with the provost's office to make sure that if there were these startup funds that were required for hiring these faculty into engineering and science, if they are within the realm of these focal areas that we had identified, and if those hires were in those areas, then our office would give them the startup funds required. So that relieved the college, and they were able to use that to replace faculty that they wanted to replace, and not the new faculty that we wanted to hire. So new faculty startup funds came from our office. Existing faculty startup funds, if they had to replace retiring faculty, teaching faculty, that came from the Department of Colleges. I do not know how those things are worked out here, and I don't even know the budgeting process that works. I would like to look at some of those things and try to see how I can help the colleges move some of those things into place. I think there was a couple of things that I...
Thank you. Well, Polly, it's my time for, I don't want to monopolize on the time.
Thank you.
Move on.
We're having difficulties online. Someone sent me a text and said that our chat feature isn't working right now.
Uh-oh.
So for those of you that are online,
Yes, there's another question.
may I give them my email address and I'll get the questions to
Yeah,
Dr.
yeah.
Vosraj? Sherry.Duffy, SHERY.DUFFY@Louisville.edu. I'll be seeing Dr. Vosraj later. We'll ask him the questions and I'll get them back to you via email. Yes, sir.
Right, again, thank you for coming. Did they share with you the recently completed strategic plan for the university?
Yes, yes.
Did they also share with you the sort of current budget situation for the university?
I haven't seen the current budget situation, but I have seen the strategic plan, yes.
What you propose is far more granular and strategic
Mhm.
than what the strategic plan detailed.
Okay.
How are you going to implement these in place of, now that we just have another plan which doesn't really go into this? How would you bring this about?
Okay. Well, from what I understood was that some of the ideas, like the grand challenges that you have had, you did not have a formalized ideas yet. So one of the things that I want to look at is try and see how much of the faculty has actually bought into these ideas that exist, and whether there are other ideas that, as I mentioned, some of these initiatives in the future, whether there are opportunities to coalesce around those ideas as well, and maybe embellish what we already have with added features into that plan.
So you'd be using a carrot or a stick to bring about change?
Both of those, I would say. I mean, I think the changes cannot be, I mean, I'm not a proponent of saying that, yeah, the upper administration has this view and you all follow this. That's not the way that I look at it. I always want to see things come from the faculty on up, because oftentimes that one would lead to, it will lead nowhere. It will lead nowhere. So I would like to, the way I implemented it at LSU was really, I started off with a series of town halls, and then after the ideas were proposed, I brought them back at one of the research retreats that we had, and we made sure that the research leaders understood that these were the plans that were going to go forward. Now, in your strategic plan, as far as I see, all those things are not identified yet. So there may be an opportunity really to go back to the faculty and say, okay, these are the ideas that we can probably coalesce around. not just the ones that you have, but I can show them all of the future things that are coming through, and we should be playing in those roles. Is it possible? I mean, I know that advanced manufacturing is already well ahead, but artificial intelligence, quantum information sciences, if they are going to come. They are there no matter what. Do you have the faculty to do that? We need to look at it. If not, we need to hire them. So that's my perspective. So it's both a carrot and a stick in a way.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Valsaraj. What, just a moment, sir. Would you stand to the microphone, please? Thank you. We have about 1 more minute.
Much of the focus has been on biomedical and hard sciences work. There is a perception, maybe unfair, that social and behavioral research and humanities work, which I think increasingly are coming together,
Right.
have not received maybe the attention they might. How would you address those?
Very good question. Very, very good question. And this is not unique here. We had the same issue at LSU over the years, where we had social scientists and humanities and arts and other parts of the university which felt that they were not being serviced as much from their research office as they should be. So what I did, the first thing that I did was I hired somebody into my office, an associate VPR, who was exclusively focused on those areas of the university, and tried to bring them along on some of the ideas that we were working on. So if you look at the strategic plan, there were 2 items in the plan that are exclusively coming from that side of the campus. Now the university is going to put money into those areas. One of the things that happened was, as a result of that, came a major emphasis on public health and public, what I would say, social aspects. And that has now become a part of the plan into which the university is going to put money into, and therefore it will catalyze to some extent, and hopefully they could receive more money elsewhere going into other grants. But I know that that's not the way that most of the other disciplines work, just like science and engineering, where you write research grants and get money. Here you have other ways of getting it from foundations and things like that. We also did something, and we engaged the LSU Foundation, the fundraising arm, to help in those efforts. So I had a series of conversations with them, wherein now they are engaged in raising money for those initiatives in particular as well. So is that possible? I do not know the culture here. I do not know all of the aspects that need to be done. But in general, I think that is possible to bring more visibility to that part of the campus.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We so appreciate your time today. Let me give him a round of applause, please. Hope the rest of your day goes well in the rain.
Let me take this off before I